company called Shear Partners, and formerly I was with Economic Development for Montgomery County for a long time, but a long time ago.
I feel like I need a bigger
Now I'm
television.
in my second or third life. What's that?
I feel like I need a bigger television. There's a lot of.
Oh, you haven't seen nothing yet. We got 50 people registered.
Yeah, this is a big draw. Morning, John. How are you? Robin?
Good morning, Marilyn. How are you?
Hi, Marilyn.
Good. Hey, haven't seen. It's so nice to see you guys. I was on a call yesterday with people that I probably haven't seen well, I haven't seen them in a year, but it was just kind of nice to see them on Zoom.
Who was that?
Hmm?
Who was that? Was that Robin? Who was
That
this?
was Robin who said hello. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, there she is.
Hey, Henry.
Hey, long time no see.
I know. How are you?
I'm good. You're blonde.
Yeah.
Congratulations. Must have gone to Florida or something.
You know what happens to Jewish women over 50?
I'm not going there. I just saw Jerry. We got the official announcement that Jerry is now officially in his new career.
Yes.
Whatever that might be.
I only have one question for you, Jerry. Do you still wake up at some ungodly hour?
You know, I wake up an hour later, you know, instead of 5 o'clock, it's 6 o'clock or 5:45 or something. Yeah, it's still taking me a while because I get, you know, we've been working remote for so long, right?
Yeah.
I get to my computer like between 8 and 8:30 every morning still. And it's like, I've got to find a new pattern.
Yeah, you will eventually.
Yeah, it's going to take a while.
So I don't know if Laura's on yet. We want to make sure that we record, and I can hit the button, but I want to make sure that we save it.
Actually, Marilyn, I think I'm able to record because I did a quick test now that I'm a co-host, but it's always good to have backup just in case mine doesn't work.
Yep, fabulous. Because we normally don't record this meeting. We normally, you know, let the comments fly. But I know that because you're in public comment period, that works best for you, right? Is that?
Yes. So as everyone joins, it's sort of the Miranda rights. Anything you say can and will be used against you because everything today's meeting will be formally entered into the record for review by the council and the planning commission.
My God, I better keep my mouth shut. Hey, Kevin, where are you? Because you're in a very stately looking conference room.
Oh, thank you. Charleston, South Carolina, in the suburb called Mount Pleasant.
Oh, wow. How's the weather down there?
It's great. It's we get about 6 weeks of 40-degree weather, maybe, and other than that, it's fall and spring are the best times to be down here.
We're bracing for the shock now of the temperature going down by 40 degrees and 40-mile-an-hour winds. And I got all dressed up in my sweater and everything, but it hasn't hit yet. And I'm like, either that or hot.
I did the same thing this morning. Yeah.
I'm getting ready for it. I listened down Chamber Economic Development and Legislative Affairs Committee monthly meeting. And we have an unusually larger than normal crowd because the topic is Lake Forest Mall, of which there's a lot of interest, concern, et cetera, and the city has been through some venting periods, and I think many of us that are on the call have participated in one type of either, I'm not sure what the right terminology is, I'll call it focus group or charrette or whatever of one kind or another. And we have we have a number of distinguished officials from the city of Gaithersburg, who I'm not going to try to name, but we all know Rob Robinson, as he's with planning department. He's presented to us several times, got the unenviable job of, I think, heading to some degree this project, and has put together a lot of data, information, et cetera, that he is going to share with us. And just as an aside, I also want to mention we have I'm not sure if special guest is the right way to put it, but we have one of the owners reps of the mall sitting with us. Kevin, and I don't know your last name, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. Kevin Rogers. Thank you.
Kevin
Yeah.
Rogers, who is part of an entity that owns a part of the mall. And I think we all are pretty well versed in the mall's ownership, where there's the inner and there's the outer, and it's too complicated to talk about. So I just wanted to recognize Kevin. Thank you for being here. And we have a very mixed crowd from the business community, of small business, large business, et cetera, et cetera. So Rob, I'm gonna let you take over the ship here and get rolling, and tell us what you.
Thank you, Henry. And again, thank you, Marilyn, for inviting us to come. As Henry mentioned, you guys were very kind in the fall to participate in a focus group. So it's good to see a lot of you again. So it's nice to be able to come here and present the fruit of our efforts. Bear with me 1 second while I begin to share my screen. Here we go.
Sorry, Rob, I wasn't paying attention. Did you just say that we're recording?
Yes. Oh, yeah. For those who joined late, as we go in, I want to be clear to everyone, as we are in the formal comment period as required under state law, this meeting is being recorded. And as I jokingly somewhat said before, this sort of like Miranda rights, everything you say can and will be used against you. So this recording will be entered into the record for review by the mayor and council and the planning commission. So
Rob, could I interrupt for 1 second? I forgot to mention that I think probably what's best, because I'm not sure how long your presentation is and we're limited on time, is to let Rob go through his presentation. If there's something burning, please use the chat room, which Marilyn will monitor and make sure questions get out that way. And then I think maybe towards the end, we'll just kind of have free for all. If we can. And
thank you, Henry. Yes, I would ask, please hold, comments and questions till the end. And, I do have a presentation that we'll be sharing to all these various groups. It's the same presentation. So if everybody can see the screen, everybody see this, the presentation first slide? Excellent. Then let's begin. So boom, bear with me 1 second. So real fast to remind everyone, what is a master plan? So under Maryland state law, a comprehensive plan is composed of various elements such as land use, transportation, and sensitive areas. What I highlighted here is the real crux for us. It's to serve the general purpose of guiding and accomplishing the coordinated, adjusted, and harmonious development of the local jurisdictions. City master plans are based upon city policy, city goals, and for the benefit of the city. They're not directed towards any single owner, developer, special interest group, whatever. It takes into consideration everyone for the city. The land use element, of which this will be an amendment, at a minimum just establishes the zoning and permitted land use should redevelopment occur. What's important to remember is a master plan in and of itself does not make redevelopment happen. And as it relates to Lake Forest Mall, the property owners can continue to reuse and operate as an existing mall in perpetuity. The only things that trigger then implementing the master plan is if you wish to rezone or you wish to re-subdivide. So that just sort of lays some legal context. Lake Forest Mall Master Plan Foundation. So again, from 102 acres, almost 16 acres is eaten up with regional stormwater management ponds. So really the net area for development is, about 86 to 87 acres. So the master plan itself reflects input received from the technical studies, data sets, 14 focus group meetings, of which, again, as Henry mentioned and Marilyn mentioned, many of you have participated in, 2 surveys, both a mailed and an online, 4 public forums, and 2 joint work sessions with the Mayor and City Council and Planning Commission. So where are we right now and why am I coming before you? The draft plan was released for the formal 60-day comment period as required under the land use article on March 19th. And the joint public hearing is scheduled for June 7th. So the plan itself, the way it's structured is it's set up into 9 sections, and plan sections 4 through 9 include a narrative discussing the topic, the recommendations, and any special conditions. Let me give you a real fast, the difference between recommendations and special conditions. The land use article lays out that development is to conform to recommendations. That means there's, more or less you have to comply with that, but there's some gray areas. Special conditions are subject to a separate public hearing and require strict adherence. So the recommendation is conformance, special conditions is strict adherence. So the first three sections, we'll just quickly breeze through. The first one is the introduction. It establishes the purpose of the plan and the physical context of the plan area. The second section is a glossary. So with this one, we use a lot of terms that aren't necessarily defined in the zoning ordinance or subdivision ordinance or et cetera. So it really establishes what some of the words we use throughout the plan mean in relation to the plan. And then we have the third section is the existing conditions and context. And this includes a summary of the key points of the economic and population growth projections and trends, surrounding land use, surrounding demographics. So again, this sets sort of the technical stage. So the first real section of the plan is the vision framework. And for those of you, it's pretty evident, I know you guys have dealt with master plans before. The purpose of the vision is to communicate the long-term big picture. It provides the foundation from which all the other sections, goals, recommendations, and special conditions relate to. And again, it reflects the priorities established through that previously mentioned public outreach process and research, review of city policy goals. I think the main takeaway for this vision as opposed to the other one is it's modernizing the term mixed use for really an emphasis on mixed. As much as we heard throughout the focus group meetings, through the work sessions, everything else, amenities and green spaces carry as much weight as buildings that get put into the ground, and a multimodal network. So a big goal of this mixed use that we're defining here is that commercial uses mean more than retail and office, and that housing means more than multifamily rental apartments and single family detached homes. So it's really trying to modernize the way mixed use has been applied in the city of Gaithersburg for, say, the last 20, 30 years. So with the recommendations, again, I know you can't read all this, but really just to highlight this stuff, and I want you to see this so you guys are encouraged to review the plan and comment separately. It talks about sense of place, the importance of connectivity, the variety of various uses, that mixed use in this sense can be, sort of viewed at the project scale, that we're not saying, every single building has to have a multiple of uses. And again, it reemphasizes the importance of a green network. What I bolded here is what I mentioned earlier, per the requirements of the land use article, the recommendation is that Lake Forest Mall be rezoned from C2 to MXD to make this happen. So then jumping in after the visioning, the first thing that we wanted to talk about was the amenities. And you guys remember from the focus group, there was a lot of discussion about this. And it's really acknowledged that amenity space is important for enhancing the quality of life and facilitating diversity. So in the narrative section, the plan, this section really addresses three things: green and open space, civic use buildings and centers, which when we say this, and this is one of the definitions, we don't mean publicly owned. We mean various buildings that can serve the greater community. And again, during the focus group meetings, there was talks about arenas and museums and down to job training centers. The master plan is not going to weigh in on which type of civic use is the most appropriate. The master plan just weighs in on the importance to create a sustainable, equitable community. You need these type of uses. And then lastly, it talks about the importance of connectivity and green networks. So as we go into the recommendations, really what's talked about is variety is important in these green and open spaces, that these spaces should be accessible to varieties of people, both in age and income and physical ability, that the stormwater management ponds be enhanced and incorporated as an asset, a green park asset to the overall development. And that the importance of the pedestrian realm, especially in light of COVID, we've seen now how important outdoor seating is, gathering spaces in a more open environment and not just enclosed. And that, the civic use is incorporated and important. And again, that all of these things should be connected through some sort of green network. And that can be, within the right of way or outside of the right of way. Now, our first special condition, which as I mentioned, means, strict adherence, not to make sausage and belabor the point, but the way the zoning ordinance is written is residential uses require 40% green space, commercial uses require 25% or 20% green space. That's so hard to do with the master plan. So what we wanted to do was establish an overall minimum of 35% green areas as defined in the MXD zone for the 102-acre parcel. So what does this roughly equate to? That's 15 acres around the ponds, 9 acres based upon our analysis per the code is usually accommodated through medians, sidewalks, tree planting strips, green areas on private lots, around homes. So really the important thing is this is going to open up 11 acres for other spaces within the 86 acres of development. That's not necessarily unreasonable. We're not saying there has to be one, we're not creating Central Park. We're not requiring that they're plopped in the middle as an 11-acre park, but it allows that we can meet all the challenges and things discussed in the recommendations. So the next section is transportation, and it's really design a grid network, improve connectivity, enhance the transit center, and encourage micromobility and safety. So these were things we heard throughout all the various focus groups and from Council and Planning Commission as a priority. So as it relates to the recommendations, they just reaffirm those sort of things. So it encourages bike ped and connectivity, the inclusion of micromobility, which for those who aren't aware, micromobility is like bike share, the scooters that you see, things like that. We do recommend, that the connection of Lake Forest Boulevard to Contour Road sort of be explored, because that seems like somewhat of a logical connection, which, a design could build off of. Enhance the transit center, and we do recommend, it should be explored to potentially relocate it and, better integrate it into an overall, development vision. But at a minimum, it still should be enhanced. And again, the last part that really talks about this is, changing parking strategies, encouraging structured parking, making sure that new surface parking incorporates things, as I sort of talk about here, electric vehicle charging stations, curbside pickup areas, micromobility nodes, and ride sharing pickup and drop off. And that's really an outcome of what we've really seen this last year with the COVID pandemic. So the next section is residential. And I think the real main themes of the narrative is residential is an essential component, but not the primary driver of development. And we had this discussion with this group during the focus group, that you need residential. There's no ifs, ands, or buts, but the goal of this is not to create a bedroom community here. So the main themes coming out is variety, housing options. We heard from everyone. It should be young professionals, families with children, older adults. Housing affordability, which is different than affordable housing. Housing affordability is market rate stuff that's not regulated. So it's affording opportunities to allow people to move into this future community and live and grow. And as their situations change, continue to advance till finally, it makes sense to, go someplace else, candidly. Density, we think, with this, again, the importance is to sort of address from our studies future population and growth. And we want housing that addresses both rental and ownership opportunities. Again, our Cura study, which was our visioning study, says, going forward, there's going to be a lot of need for rental based upon demographics, but it's larger rental. It's 3-bedroom units, 2-bedroom units. We're not looking for a fix on just efficiencies. So with the recommendations, again, including a broader range of affordability. We think it's very important that any housing include amenity and open space plan. That's an outgrowth, again, sort of what we've seen this past year with COVID. We do have in there, design standards that we'd like to have, abided by. And we do make note that any build out, the potential impact on public schools needs to be monitored. We are not at this stage in this master plan recommending a school site, but we are acknowledging if something comes in at the time development comes and there is a burden that can't be accommodated, we should be prepared to incorporate an applicable school site. So special conditions, again, this is strict adherence, and I'll explain this. We are establishing a residential unit cap of 1,600 units with the following percentages: townhomes up to 7%, missing middle 20 to 30%, and multifamily, both rental and owned, which is more structured, 63 to 73%. So the reason for doing this is there's limited land mass. Single family detached homes are not appropriate for this site. It eats up a lot of land and doesn't contribute much. Same can sort of be said for townhomes. 7% is a sizable land mass. And when you look at the surrounding areas, there are lots of townhomes. As Maryland may be aware of, just Montgomery Village, not a mile away with the golf course, has 500 single family units coming in. So, really what we wanted to encourage was the missing middle, and this addresses the housing affordability aspect. So triplexes, bungalow courts, things not typically seen in the city now, but is a trend going forward. So we want to accommodate that. That provides the benefit of not being a multifamily structure per se, and gives you some of the benefits of a single family home without gobbling up the land mass that a single family home does. So again, detached homes sited on individual lots are prohibited. And I'm sorry, this last one is, this is a livability issue that we've experienced in other developments. So townhomes less than 20 feet in width require 0.75 on-street parking spaces per unit within the same block. What this is based upon is, in reality, a 20-foot townhome with a driveway accommodates 4 cars. When you begin, while we like to talk about, transit and everything else and walkability, everything, this area still drives and people still have multi-car households. So we need to make sure from a livability standpoint that, that people can actually, have parking in their area and not begin to burden other blocks or other areas because a smaller townhome can't facilitate a family's parking needs. So on to commercial. So as we sort of mentioned, as I mentioned earlier, we really want to include a broader spectrum of commercial uses than mainly retail. We had a real in-depth discussion with this group during the focus group meetings about this in the fall. So there's biotech, there's integrated light manufacturing, the importance of experiential uses, new things like maker spaces, and we heard again things like job training centers. This is sort of the non-residential uses we want to see brought into Lake Forest. As retail, again, we know there's a glut of GAFO. So really what we're really looking for is neighborhood scaled retail. I mean, just across Lost Knife are 2 shopping centers in Montgomery Village that have GAFO. Within a half mile is Federal Realty's Gaithersburg Square that has GAFO. 2 miles north is Milestone Center, which has big box GAFO. So again, we're really trying to encourage other commercial uses, but acknowledging that these experiential restaurants and retail and maker spaces and everything else contributes to the variety and sustainability of a long-term development. And again, based upon that, with employment, we want commercial uses that provide a diversity of wage scales and career growth opportunities. 100% retail means basically, 80%, 85% minimum wage jobs. That does not benefit the city. That doesn't foster ideas such as live where you work. We want to have some of these higher paying jobs. We want to have growth potential. We are a highly educated region, as you know that. So we want to capture those people, much as was brought up by this group during the focus group meetings. We're tired of seeing a brain drain go to other areas. We want to keep them here. So we need the jobs to do that. So as to the recommendations, again, reflect the design standards that we talk about. There's no square footage or acreage cap on retail spaces included in vertical mixed use developments. That surface parking lots are discouraged, and that neighborhood goods and services, are really the preferred over GAFO retail. So as to the special conditions, standalone or solely retail facilities are limited to a maximum of 5 acres total, including surface parking lots across the entirety of development. And that standalone retail or solely retail footprints must not exceed 30,000 square feet each. And then we have a list of uses that are going to be strictly prohibited because they really, as we say, are antithetical to the plan's greater vision. But going to those first 2 points, and I see my friend Tom Lonergan's here, so if he wants to jump in at any point on this discussion, really what we're trying to do is we're trying to encourage vertical mixed use development. And that's why we said, hey, if you build up, great. We don't want to limit the site to large surface parking lots, which preclude amenities, transportation, the connectivity. We don't need a collection of large pad sites throughout of single users. That's not an efficient use of space for retail. Again, if our friends, I'm working the lead planner on the Novavax sketch plan. If Novavax came in and said, hey, give us 14 acres to build another campus, we would be in support of that because that builds more goals. That's something that's not found in this area. So that's supported. So really, and where these numbers came from is, it was really looking at the commercial trends now in the region for grocery stores. So again, most grocery stores don't go above 30,000 square feet in footprints anymore. So these special conditions are really meant to not discourage retail. It's just do it in a form that works better with the greater overall holistic vision of what we want to see for Lake Forest. And then the last section is the post-master plan. Now, we addressed this because we thought it was important because, you know, we're working in a real world, so we didn't want to create a fantasy land. So while we think cohesive development under one sketch plan would be the greatest thing ever, we acknowledge, one, that may not occur and that it may occur in phases. So we want to make sure that we're clear that interim C2 uses are allowed. As I mentioned, the master plan doesn't require redevelopment. But we want these C2 uses to continue as long as they don't detract or prevent realization of the plan's ultimate vision. So if you know you have certain things, you know, we don't want to see, you know, potentially, you know, a new pad site coming in that would potentially, you know, throw off a road network. You know, we're willing to work with you, but we have that ability. And that any development phases, this is so when you want to rezone to MXD in accordance with the master plan and begin implementing the master plan, we want to see more than one aspect of mixed use. So what that means is we don't want to see just a single apartment building come in. If you come in with an apartment building, we also want to see the surrounding road network that's going to build into and the amenities and open spaces that are coming in with that to make that a successful development. So with the recommendations, the city wants to facilitate communication and coordination amongst the mall site owners, you know, to hopefully get one single, you know, development plan. We acknowledge the potential need for interim uses, and we want to be flexible in their review. The plan does not support comprehensive rezoning in accordance with this master plan. We want to allow interim development under the existing C2 zone to continue because we know this is going to be an expensive endeavor. So we want to have people, you know, be able to build up capital to be able, when they're ready, to implement the plan and be able to finance it and afford it. And further, we want to avoid unnecessary procedures related to the MXD zoning. So we're not recommending comp rezoning on this one. The very first phase of any phase development must incorporate a minimum of 10 acres exclusive of the pond areas. We don't want the first sketch plan just to be the 15 acres of the ponds. That really doesn't mean anything. And the 10 acres number is established in code that the minimum to rezone to MXD needs to be 10 acres. So we're really hoping that the first phase that comes in out of the 80 is going to be 1/8 of the site. And because of the other stuff we wrote, is really going to give a sense of how they're meeting these various mixed use things that we discuss. Again, the interim uses or phases must not prevent the realization of the plan's vision. And again, we've adopted, while state law says that the city's comprehensive plan, that's every element, gets reviewed every 10 years. We wrote in specifically for this that the city in 10 years from adoption will perform an assessment regarding the success or failure in implementing the plan's recommendations. For many of you, as Maryland is aware, the county's going through a similar effort with their GSSC master plan now that it's been 10 years. They're sort of assessing what worked and what didn't work. The question always comes, hey, why did you just do Lake Forest? There were a number of reasons that were discussed and are available for review, but we want to acknowledge and confirm to everyone, all the surrounding properties in the city are going to be reviewed in the next land use element after the adoption of this plan to really look at how the world has changed more post-COVID and how any development on these other properties would relate to this master plan. And we're hoping to begin work on land use and transportation, hopefully, fingers crossed, I know I'm being recorded, in FY23. So next steps. Currently, we're in the comment period. Again, just to give you guys a hard date, May 21st, all comments received by May 21st are guaranteed to be included in the Council and Planning Commission public hearing packet. If stuff comes in after May 21st, it's still going to be in the record, but there's no guarantee that it will be, you know, provided to those two bodies prior to the prior to the public hearing for their review. As I mentioned, the joint public hearing is being conducted in June. So, you know, during this comment period, we do not change the plan. Staff has done their draft. We got the blessing. You know, what I've presented to you is the formal public hearing draft. The earliest the plan will be revised is following the joint public hearing. And that's really at the discretion and guidance of the Planning Commission and the Mayor and Council. So what happens? We're going to be collecting all these comments up till May 21st. And as we prepare for the joint public hearing, staff will be collating everything. And during the public hearing, we'll probably be presenting, comment, everything, of course, but any recommendations or things that we note, trends that we note, and we may not recommend anything, we just may note a trend of something. But it's really, any amendments outside of, formatting corrections or last minute grammar and punctuation is really directed by the mayor and council and the planning commission. So July is the planning commission approval under state law. They actually approve the master plan. And then they make a recommendation for the mayor and council to adopt. So everybody just be aware, the mayor and council technically don't approve a master plan, they just adopt the master plan. So that's destined to occur in August. And as we talked about during the focus group meetings, there is a development moratorium and that expires on the 17th. So we're hoping to have approval and adoption done before the expiration of the moratorium. So stay engaged. Our project page is still up that we talked about last fall, gaithersburgmd.gov, Lake Forest Master Plan. And for comments or questions, outside of today's effort, as you begin to look, and the draft plan is on the project page, all the background materials are on the project page. We are real-time updating the formal public hearing record, so you can see comments that have already been issued. Send all of these to lakeforestmp@gaithersburgmd.gov. And with that, folks, hopefully, Henry, I went fast enough for you to give time for everyone's discussion.
And that was a lot of information, Rob. And I know for my brain, I'm still digesting, and obviously because of my background, I've been through this a lot of times. But I didn't see much in the chat room except John Compton's very witty comment about my malapropism. But I don't know, Marilyn, you want to start out with some questions, or how should we do this from here? Because I think we've got 20 minutes or so left.
Yeah. I think that we can try. If you've got a question, just speak up and we'll try that. If we're talking over each other, we can raise a hand, or I'll call on people. So either physically raise your hand or raise your hand electronically, but let's just go if anybody has questions or comments. If you can find the mute button. Martha.
Oh, okay. So this may be obvious to other people, but since we're not in Gaithersburg, how do you go about getting your focus group?
The 14 focus groups?
Yes.
We looked at who would be logical stakeholders. So again, on the project page are minute summaries of all 14 focus groups, but it went from everything from the Chamber to Montgomery Village Foundation, to Montgomery Planning, to Maryland State Highway Administration, to high schoolers, to Asbury Methodist Village, to representatives of all the various city advisory committees. So we really made a concerted effort, especially given the challenges that we couldn't do stuff in person, given COVID. So we wanted to make sure we left no stone unturned. As Kevin could attest, we also did a focus group with the 5 mall owners representatives. So, we wanted to be open. We wanted to hear what people had to say. And this also built into the 4 public forums also, which were at large, advertised, and anybody could have registered for who wasn't a member of the focus group.
Okay. Good feedback.
And Kevin, did you just go off mute?
I did. Yeah, sure. If you have a couple of minutes.
Go ahead.
Well, I wanted to thank you for giving me the chance to address you. And the mall has been a longtime member of the chamber, and we've continued that tradition and proud to do so, and appreciate all that the chamber does for the community. And I'm particularly grateful to be able to have the chance briefly, and I'll keep my comments very short, to address the business community, business owners and employees and others with a significant financial interest in the community. We bought them all in roughly middle 2019 with the purposeful intention of redeveloping the entire 100-acre site. Our purchase included about 47 of those total 100 acres. And again, the intent was to do a great, and still is, to do a great new mixed-use project that knocks down everything you see there and comes out of the ground with something wonderful. Based upon extensive feedback from various tenants, users, home builders, you name it, the demand is there. There's more than enough demand for this to occur now, for this to occur as soon as we could get through the entitlement gauntlet. I'll tell you that it's been rewarding during that time frame to meet with as many of the neighbors as I could get out and meet with, such as 24 residents of Asbury Village, their leadership. The lady that writes their monthly newsletter interviewed me, published our plan for the entire body of residents at Asbury Village. Along with them, the leadership of Montgomery County Housing Opportunities Commission, the owners of Cider Mill Apartments across the street. They have plans to make a significant investment over there themselves. And lastly, the full board of directors of Montgomery Village. All of those immediate neighbors have a major interest in what happens here, and all of them want to see something happen much sooner than later. They want to see something happen right now.
Excuse me, Kevin, I just want to say that we have this wasn't a time for you to give a presentation. So if you have some general comments, if you could kind of speed it up a little, because we have a lot of people on the call that maybe want to ask Rob some questions. So if you could kind of cut to, like where you're going. I don't mean to be rude, but please, if you could, kind of keep things rolling a little bit, because we want to get a lot of input here.
Sure. I'll draw your attention to one part of the master plan document that I think you all have, which should be troubling to all of you. The post master plan section says that, and I quote, once the master plan is adopted, the expectation amongst people is that implementation will soon follow. However, due to ownership structures, financing, construction issues, and timing, master plans often take years or decades to become a reality. And that should be a problem for everyone, for us, for everyone who drives by there. Because left unchanged, this document will force us and the other owners, as Rob alluded to, anything can happen under the current existing zoning, to take any measure possible to repopulate the existing facilities that are there, lease them up, which will forestall and delay any kind of redevelopment for years to come. So we have serious issues and concerns with the draft as it's been presented and as typed up. We'll be preparing a detailed response for submittal to the city. I promised to send Marilyn a copy of that, and she's welcome to provide that to all of you if any of you are interested. I'm happy to take any questions that you have.
Thanks for that comment. And I think, we've all been through this before, as I said, and we know these master plans take a long time, and we would like to see things happen sooner than later as well. But again, there is the public process that, we have to go through, but I'm stopping there because I'm not part of that team anymore. So I did have a question. Marilyn, is there somebody else on, or can I?
John put a comment in the chat to me as opposed to the group. So let me just, outstanding omission seems to be that, and this is something that I commented on at the work session, not including the surrounding commercial segments, which also see revisioning. So I think that's the issue of what is the larger vision, so perhaps looking at the entire area and how this plan fits into that. So it's like, is this the cart before the horse? And looking at, because we've got, the Lost Knife area, the Holiday Inn, the Sam's Club, all those areas are rife for redevelopment. So John, jump in if I didn't do your comment justice.
No, you're good, Marilyn. That's fine. I actually communicated with Rob a few weeks ago on this, and I just want to readdress that because I do believe that Gaithersburg is, and I appreciate the comments of the new mall owner, but nevertheless, this is the moment to create a plan for the larger area that includes Lake Forest Mall. And it appears, while they say, I heard Rob say, well, that will be our next project. That I agree with Marilyn's terminology. That really is this is the cart before the horse, because there are several things wrong with missing from this plan, and that is, you're going to create a very forward-thinking mixed-use environment, which will be attractive certainly to the mall owner, the property owner, but it stands in isolation. There's no transportation solution. Lake Forest is accessible public transportation by bus only at this point. It's a vehicle or bus situation.
So John, maybe we can let Rob answer the question, because I think he gets the gist of what you're asking.
As I mentioned to the mayor, with this thought, we have a history of studies going all the way back to the 2013 development capacity study that acknowledges the main catalyst in this region is Lake Forest Mall, and that needs to be addressed first. And in fact, the Montgomery Village Master Plan acknowledged they didn't really make any recommendations for the properties across Lost Knife because it has to be in response to what happens at Lake Forest. So again, we have while we can point out things like the Holiday Inn and other ones, we have very other successful developments. The master plan does discuss, and we do have plenty of studies that talk about the importance of 355 BRT, which is another linkage. Again, if you read the document, we do talk about the importance of linkages and acknowledging existing ingress and egress points and connectivity. As I mentioned, going all the way back to when we first did this focus group with you guys, and we're doing stuff in the fall, this was never intended to be a design plan. This plan is meant to talk about what and how and not where. We had to build in flexibility, doing a detailed design plan and, saying, and we want a transit line going right through here would not be productive. Those are the master plans that are destined to fail, especially in this era of COVID. So I appreciate, so again, I think it's important that we had to address Lake Forest, while we're lucky that, Macy's continues to operate and that WRS continues to operate the core, we do have other anchors that have gone under and shuttered. There's no other property except for the Holiday Inn, which wasn't the case when we began this effort, that have shuttered. We acknowledge in the existing master plan that those properties are ripe for redevelopment, but we should really see how it's best to have them respond to what is sort of envisioned at Lake Forest, rather than Lake Forest responding to what is happening to them. And I hope that sort of answers the question.
Anybody else, Marilyn, in the queue there?
Yeah, go ahead.
So, well, my question I think goes along with that, but it's a little bit on the inverse, and that is that relative to the fact that you have a single owner who controls the inside, and then you have these 5 or 4 other anchors that, we've seen one of them in another location be immovable, et cetera. How does the plan deal with, and I think Kevin, just mentioned the timing issue. I don't really understand how you can redevelop an area when you don't have everybody on board, if you will. And barring, some research that I did way back in the day where, you could possibly declare eminent domain for economic development purposes and, do something crazy like that. I don't really get how this thing gets any legs without the whole, all the troops being on board. And so how do you do a plan? I mean, I understand how you do the plan because it's just very general, but the reality of having something actually happen is the part that I think we're all sitting around scratching our heads about.
Henry, I totally agree, and that's a challenge with any master plan. As I mentioned a little while ago with Maryland, the county's dealing with this with GSSC. It's the same thing. As I mentioned from the start, master plans do not mandate redevelopment. We can try to encourage, and we're hoping this plan lays out enough framework that it's clear the vision, but provides enough flexibility that it increases the value for the individual owners to want to redevelop. But again, that's not our call. If any one of the 5 owners chooses never to redevelop, outside of extraordinary circumstances, Henry, and this plan was not going to touch eminent domain. That's the challenge. That's always the risk. As I mentioned during the focus group meetings, the Kentlands Commercial District Master Plan, which basically only had 2 owners, took 10 years before both owners decided to pull the trigger. And one of the original owners sold. So it was a secondary owner who actually wanted to implement the master plan. So this is always a challenge.
Right. Kevin, you had a comment here?
Sure. I mean, to answer your question, this master plan exercise not only can't address the common ownership question that you raised, which is the only thing that would enable an overall 100-acre redevelopment, but it runs counter to the notion of creating an environment where there can even be common ownership for there to be an overall redevelopment. This document makes it less likely that all the disparate owners will come together, sell to one party, and create an opportunity for there to be an overall redevelopment. Each of the owners are actively, currently reviewing options to monetize, to repopulate their existing facilities, to lease them out, to sell them to a user that none of us wants to see, a car dealer or what have you. And it would have lasting long-term effects on the redevelopment opportunity of this overall project for years. And it is a result of this master plan document if it's implemented.
Thank you.
Question from Bradley Chad. Actually 3 questions. Let me go through them. How much is the pandemic influencing the plan as opposed to a longer term view of development? So I'm going to ask the 3 and then you can respond. And then
why don't you let the individuals and maybe.
Okay, Bradley. Yeah, if you want to.
Sure, I can ask the question myself. The question is, I'll just ask them one at a time. How much is the recency of the pandemic influencing the plan as opposed to the longer term view of development?
I'll take that one first. So as we talked about in the fall with many groups, the impact was why we didn't do a design plan, first of all, and why we wrote in elements, things that we saw that we think aren't going away. So the changing nature of retail. The increased importance of open and green space now and gathering spaces, even going down to in certain discussions with multifamily builders, how they are changing the design of multifamily. So the plan is influenced to build in flexibility because, again, even though people are getting vaccinated, and in fact, I get my first shot at 3 o'clock today, so I'm excited. There's still a lot of unknowns in the market. So that's why, again, we want to try to provide non-residential diversity to maintain sustainability and resilience in the face. We want to build in this flexibility in discussions. So, but I think that to your point, Bradley, the main thing that where you really saw the influence was in the discussion of the open spaces, discussing enhanced pedestrian realms, the importance of green networks, things like that, which is really an outgrowth. The parking strategies, I think we all sort of acknowledge, and in discussions with, groups like with Henry, the nature of curbside pickup is not going away. The importance of outdoor for experiential purposes with restaurants is not going to go away.
Right, but cars, respectfully, aren't going away either.
Exactly.
And it must be considered, obviously, that the city is part of the larger ecosystem of 270, the up county. And I can speak from personal experience with being a developer in the up county for the last 20 years. we still love our cars. And it's, you know, I own 156 acres in Germantown and 45 further south at Shady Grove Road. There's a reason there's parking lots. That's how people get to work. Pandemic notwithstanding, it's not like all of a sudden, even if people only show up at their office, if this is even the case, 3 days a week, they still have to park somewhere. So I would just caution you to not go too far down the everybody's going to ride public transit anywhere.
No, we did not. As we sort of mentioned, that was part of the outgrowth, again, reflected in the requirement on the minimum on-street parking spaces for townhomes. We acknowledge cars aren't going away. Again, we want to encourage structured parking because we feel it's a more efficient use of land. And where we want to discourage large surface lots is related to retail. Again, if an office user comes in, we fully acknowledge they're going to need a surface parking lot, and we want to encourage that and make it work.
I completely agree that structured parking is more efficient. It's also grossly more expensive. So is the city willing to do something to enable that compact nature? I mean, to happen? I mean, a parking space is going to cost the structure above grade $20,000 per space. And, you know, for the land area you're talking, that's not an inconsequential number. I
concur, but again, because we are being reported, I am not committing the city to anything.
I'm not asking you to commit to the city to doing something. My point is, and I've been through this, and I built a 1,000-space parking garage in Germantown. There's trade-offs is all I'm saying that have to come. And, you know, I can only speak to that master plan and what I ultimately did there. And what I did was not part of the master plan. But it was what needed to be done. So my last question, without monopolizing this, is, as I alluded to before, the city is part of the Upcounty. What has the city seen in the past 5 to 10 years of what has been built, we'll call it north of Shady Grove Road, basically your domain, up to Germantown, which I guess is what, 118 basically, or Middlebrook Road maybe. What has the city seen in terms of non-residential development in the past 5 to 10 years that's happened there? And how do you think that this particular Lake Forest site is going to fit into that larger ecosystem?
Right off the cuff, I don't think I have a real clear answer for you. When you look within like the last 10, 20 years, what has been built, Crown development, including the mixed-use commercial core, which, you know, did have structured parking, MedImmune, the expansion of AstraZeneca, which included, you know, structured parking garage being built. So, you know, other large-scale projects, the Spectrum development, you know, just a bit north, you know, in preparation for the Watkins Mill interchange. Again, multifamily, commercial uses, structured parking. So if your question is, you know, how does this fit, you know, from Shady Grove to Germantown, you know, I don't want to misspeak. So I'm just going to go, I really don't have a firm answer for you.
The question is, outside of the single user, what I'm going to call unicorns, the MedImmunes, the AstraZenecas, which are once in a, you know, a generational development that we could all sit and wait for forever. Like in terms of what's been built, you know, we all wait for the big dog to show up, but like, you know, I've had this discussion with the county multiple times. The county, I'm sure the city, which I'm not as familiar with, is built on small businesses. And you talk about like the neighborhood stuff, you know, I guess what I would encourage you to do is look at how many new buildings over 30,000 square feet of non-residential use have been built in the last 15 years north of Shady Grove Road, and really understand how this site is going to fit into that ecosystem and compete or collaborate with the great Seneca Science Corridor and other stuff. Because candidly, it is a zero-sum game. Whomever comes to your site is probably leaving another site and vice versa. That is the truth of the matter.
Great point, Bradley. Marilyn, were there some other folks on with questions?
No, let me check. No, we're good.
Oh, okay. I thought there were some other folks.
Kevin commented that, you know, he's willing to answer questions that anybody might have.
Anybody have a question of Kevin, being that he is one of the owners? I guess I personally, you know, I'll look forward to your written comments, and if anything you get to Marilyn, we'll circulate around to the members of the chamber. We, would be happy to do that. I wonder, not to put you on the spot, Tom Lonergan, but any reflections on your end of this, since you're, kind of from the economic development perspective?
Not much in the way of reflections, Henry. It was an effort undertaken by planning. We were happy to provide them support through the process, but I think Rob laid it out pretty nicely, and the plan is reflective of a lot of forces. So, Rob, good job on the presentation.
And I see Stuart on here, and it's always good to hear from a land use attorney about since you're living and breathing this stuff. Any reflections on your end, Stuart? And as being past chair of the chamber, and
thanks, Henry. Good morning, everyone. Stuart Barler, Charlie and Brewer. I always want to be careful with conversations like this, because as most people know, our firm has oftentimes a direct interest. To my knowledge, we don't currently have a client relationship interest in the mall site right at this moment, though we have from time to time over the years. So our firm does have a client relationship interest with some of the larger retailers, such as the Home Depots and Costco's of the world. So did take an interest in the prohibition of certain size stores, and was wondering, Rob, about, well, first of all, Rob, thanks for taking the time this morning and all the time the city has spent on this. We appreciate the update today. I guess, well, let me throw out a couple questions. One is on the larger retailers. There are examples of those types of stores going into more urban settings with perhaps smaller footprints, not quite the vast prototypes that you see in suburbia with the surface parking, with smaller footprints with structured parking and perhaps uses above. What would be wrong with something like that?
Nothing. It's actually encouraged, Stuart. That's why we wrote there is no limitation on vertical. And in fact, we have an example of that here in the city that we've had for over 20 years. The Target down in Washingtonian was the first multi-story Target with structured parking. So again, all that we're trying to preclude to get a more efficient use of land is, the classic, giant field of parking with one single story building with a 60,000 square foot footprint. We would gladly have any chain that's willing to come in that works within the parameters.
Is 60 the limit? I didn't.
30,000 square feet right now is our building footprint for any single retailer. But again, single use is limited to 5 acres, including parking, surface parking total.
Okay.
I see Jeff Fuller on the call. Jeff is one of the few people that's been around as long as me, but he's done a lot more damage to the 270 corridor in terms of designing development. Jeff, you have any feelings about this or questions or anything you'd like to throw out there?
I think the biggest, issue here was addressed by Kevin, is the multiple ownerships that you have engaged. And I applaud the city for trying to end up with something that's going to be flexible. But it really is, it's a tough nut to crack with the different ownerships that's there. And I think we do need to be careful, as Kevin said, not to do something that's going to limit his negotiating power to do what he needs to do. But at the same time, ends up with something that's good for the city and the community around us. I can't say I have a solution to it. It's a tough one.
We all, I think, agree with you on that. So we're getting to the end, and I don't know if there's a last word, Marilyn. I'll give it to you, and I got to jump for a 9:30 meeting. So
I don't know if this is the last word, but I do want to mention that at the various work sessions, the discussion of affordable housing versus market rate housing came up at the council level, mayor and council level, and while we will express a formal view during the testimony, I do think that market rate housing, the plan calls for market rate housing, and I wouldn't want that to change. I think that we need to look at market rate versus any other kind of subsidized housing in this plan. And I think Henry did pop off.
No,
So,
I'm still here. I'm still here.
I'll let you close it out.
So any other last words out there? We got another minute or so left. Nope. Okay. Well, this was a great conversation. Rob, as usual, you did a great job. Kevin, thank you very much for joining us. We'll be looking forward to your comments so we can, I think, all get a better understanding from, ownership's point of view, because, I understand that a lot of times the municipalities will throw things out there that ownership doesn't or can't feel is doable. And I think, Bradley made some good points about that kind of thing as well. And so, we're eager to see or hear any comments, and we'll air them out through the chamber membership. And we saw the time frame. So again, thanks to all you guys, from the city that was here and everybody that showed up for the meeting today. So
again, thank you, Henry and Marilyn, for inviting us. We appreciate the opportunity to present the plan. And again, everybody remember that May 21st deadline, the deadline to be in the packet. So.
Okay.
Thanks.
Bye-bye, everybody.
I think it's very exciting to think about. So bye, everyone. Thanks for coming. And Rob, can you send me your slides and I'll get them out to everyone?
Sure, not a problem. Actually, the presentation will be posted on the project page, so maybe that'll be a carrot to encourage you to go to the project page.
Yeah, that's great, because I want people to actually look at the master plan itself, as well as the slides. I've read it a couple times.
Great. Thanks again, folks. Have a great day.
Bye, everyone.